Hello, people. This is your host Vikas again with another episode at Run with Fitpage. We will talk about the details of the episode in a minute, but before that, let me give you some update on application development of Fitpage. As some of you already know, for over a year now, we've been working on developing this highly intuitive and personalized running and walking application. This application focuses on your current endurance abilities and bases that it creates training paces, volumes that are customized to meet your abilities. If you've not looked at it, actually you should possibly consider downloading the application Fitpage. I'm not doing a marketing gig, but it's sincerely something that we have built with a lot of love and passion for running, and I'm sure you would like it. And if there is any feedback, like I've always said in the previous podcast as well, please feel free to drop me a note at vikas@fitpage.in, and we will make sure in no time we have taken your feedback in consideration. Okay, so enough about the application. Let's move to the episode. In today's episode, we are speaking with Greg McMillan. I'm sure all of you have already heard of him. If you've not heard of anything about him, I'm sure you've used his McMillan Calculator to decide your training paces and find out your race predictor. Greg McMillan is a lot more than just the training calculator. It is something that helps us immensely, but let's understand more from him as to how he got started with his own running journey, how he came about to do what he did in the very early stages of coaching and brought technology in doing this, and how he actually is being super successful in getting more than 10,000 runners to qualify for Boston over the period of last so many years. Without further ado, let's welcome Greg McMillan to the show. Greg, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I've been a great fan of your running calculator, and thank you for giving that to the running community many years ago, before anything came. So I think I do not need to know any more about who you are. I know enough and have read and studied about you a lot. And also anyone who has even minor interest in running, they know of you. But for our new listeners who are just coming and getting started, I wanted to take a liberty to ask if you can give a brief introduction of you, specifically around your running journey, how you started, where you're from, etc. And then we can dial in right away.
Sure. Well, I started running, really fell in love with the sport in high school. And that kind of flipped the switch for me and it set me on the path of life. And I was successful in high school. I was state champion in the mile. And then I ran in college and continued to compete after, and then was national champion as a master's runner, which is over 40 years old. So continued to train and compete. And during that time, I was also studying exercise physiology. So my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in exercise science. And of course, if you're studying that and you're really interested in running and you're a good runner, people start asking you more and more questions. And so it was, I was happy to share with them my own running experiences and what I was learning through my study of exercise science. And then they ask you for a workout, and then they ask you to put a training plan together, and then they call you coach. So that's sort of been my journey. It's been in three parts, I guess, starting as a runner and just really falling in love with the sport. And then because of that, studying exercise science, which I enjoy kind of the scientific component of training. And then, just loving helping other people, that's you become a coach. And I've been really lucky as a coach to work with everyone from new runners who are just getting started, trying to make that change in their life, to age group athletes trying to break certain time barriers or finish their first marathon, up to national champions, world championship competitors, and even Olympians. So seeing the full spectrum, I've been really lucky to be able to do that and tour and be mentored by some of the world's greatest coaches. So, I kind of come at it from being a runner to studying exercise physiology to being a coach. And just kind of I've been really fortunate to, for the last 30 years, be doing that.
Great. It seems like a full cycle. And when you look at it in the hindsight, seems like it was all very naturally aligned to each other and just kept happening. But the coaching, did it happen exactly this way, or one day you decided now you were wanting to pick up coaching and transform people, the runners, for them to get better?
No, I never intended to be a coach. It really was organic in that way, in that I was just running and studying and sharing with people who would ask me questions. And I think because naturally I enjoy working with people and helping people, it lent itself to that profession of coach. But that was not the outset of I'm going to become a coach. It was more of just being passionate about it and sharing it, and then starting to be successful at helping people. And of course, if you're successful at helping people, they tell two friends who they tell two friends, and all of a sudden you've kind of got a job as a coach. So it really did happen organically that way. And I still, because I did tour with these legendary coaches, I don't even kind of consider myself a coach. I still feel like I'm an apprentice, but I've been really lucky to work with so many athletes and have success, like I said. Yeah, I've been really fortunate that way.
Beautiful. I can tell you're very humble, and I also see network externality effect was at its best, where people moved from telling from one point to other, from one family to other, one friend to other, and it just works. Like someone like me, like I said earlier, I've known your calculator, and that's how my orientation to Mr. Greg McMillan was online when I saw it and started using it. And like me, there are millions of people who use it. And so my natural interest and question is going to be around the calculator. How did that come in being? I think it was possibly at a stage when internet itself had not evolved as much, and people were not also about Excel sheet as much. People were looking at using pen and paper, and that's how the plans were being created. The physical touch with the training plan when it's written on a pen and paper, and also speaking and meeting with the coaches at a course or track, etc., was valued a lot more. How did you at that point of time think of create something like an online calculator?
Well, again, it was born out of necessity because I was coaching such a wide range of runners. I needed a system so that I could tell them the exact training paces that they should be running for the different types of runs that runners do, particularly when they're preparing for a race. And then also trying to get a prediction of their finish time so you can help them plan their racing strategy. And at that time, you were using rules of thumb, or there were a few sort of handbooks that had tables in them, and you could kind of get some information from that, but none of them kind of fit what I wanted. And then I also felt like they all had limitations. And then I also was studying my master's thesis is on predicting performance using laboratory results. So I was kind of getting all this information about optimal training for each individual runner, no matter if they're slow or they're fast or they're in between. And so then I kind of created my own way of kind of using what I had seen with other people who had created methods for predicting performance and creating paces, and then my own research that I was using from a master's thesis. And that became just this formula that I would use. And I had a big, and I still have this binder that's just printouts of Excel sheets. And I would just, find you and your performance level. And then I could tell you exactly what paces you should use. And then in the mid 90s, as the internet became alive, I had a buddy who said, hey, well, we can just program this and put it on the web. That way you don't have to flip through all of these pages. You can just put their information in. So I put it up just for myself. It was for me to use, to be able then to communicate to the runner, like, oh, this is the proper pacing for you. And it was on, some obscure page of the website. And it was only a few months later that he called me and he said, what is going on this page of your website? Because it's getting a lot of hits. I said, I don't know. Let me look. And it was the calculator page. And so it just, people, coaches, and, runners like yourself were finding value in it, just as the same reason I had created it, because then it made it easy to know what to do. And so now it's kind of become what I'm known for, and it's front and center on the website. And it's always been free. It always will be free for people to go in and try to get an idea of, what kind of paces should I be running for different runs, and what can I achieve my goal? I want to achieve this time. Is it possible or not?
Beautiful. Let's dig further in the calculator itself. So, how does it really work? What is it calculating when someone comes on the platform? They look at your calculator. How should they understand what it really does, and how it works, how it figures out your cardiorespiratory fitness level or anything else that it does?
Yeah, so it's kind of a blend of real world experiences and exercise physiology. And from physiology, we know there's different thresholds and capacities that the body has, and that's kind of known, but it's varied based on the speed of the runner, et cetera. And so what the calculator is trying to do is say, based on what we know of you from the inputs that you put in, because you put in what your goal is and your goal time, you put in what your current fitness is if you've run a race, or what's your average training pace. And from that information, we can start to tease out where you may lie, and based on your thresholds and capacities, and then how those translate into running performance and racing performance. And then from that, we know from exercise physiology, if you train in certain training zones, then you get certain adaptations. And so that allows the runner to say, oh, if I want to improve my lactate threshold, then I need to do training at these paces, what we call stamina zone training. So it kind of just works into taking a little bit of knowledge about the runner and then being able to provide them with precise ranges, so they know when they go out for a run, they're doing it correctly, that they're going to get the adaptations that they're after.
Got it. So let's take an example that someone is an absolute beginner and wants to get started on their running journey or walking journey, and they want to take an assessment to figure out where they stand. Can the calculator still be used? And if it is, how should someone approach it then?
Yeah, it's tougher if you haven't done any running, because it is asking you for current running information. So what we'll do is we'll say, hey, go out and just spend a week or two getting started, maybe going for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and maybe you have to do run walk, whatever it is, and allow your breathing to guide your training. So you should never get completely out of breath. And if you're doing run walk, you should easily be able to recover your breath on the walking segments, and then see what your average training pace is from that. And once you know your average training pace, and let's say it's 12 minutes per mile, or I don't know, that might be 7 or 8 minutes per kilometer, right? And so you can then, in step 3 of the calculator, you can input what your average training pace is. And then based on that information, we can back into your current performance level. So for new runners, we added that component so that they're able to kind of put in what their average training pace is. They don't have to have an extensive racing history in order to use it.
Got it. Why I asked this question specifically was because in India, running is at its infancy stage, or rather early stage, and people are picking up the sport more and more every year. And so this question keeps coming, which is slightly different than the matured markets. That if they are absolute beginners, they have so many ifs and so many questions. How do I get started? What do I really do? So that's where this question was. And so if there is someone who's an absolute beginner, like I was saying earlier, do you think, is there anything else that they should be aware of as they get started that will make them more successful at continuing running, whether it's in terms of effort or training or timing? How should they be approaching it just for first few weeks?
Yeah, there's a few really important things. The first thing is just to focus on a sustainable routine. And so if you haven't done any running, then it doesn't make sense to start running every day, right? That's too much. So look at your life schedule and think about what is sustainable. Maybe it's 3 days per week, maybe it's 4 days per week. What doesn't matter, but figure out what can work within your life schedule, because life schedules are always changing. So you need something that can be sustainable, because that'll, running is about consistency. So you want a training schedule that you can do every week, even when life gets a little bit crazy. And then the second thing is you should start very gently, because the mistake most people do is that they go out and they run too much, too soon, and too hard. And then they end up getting injured a few weeks later. So we're always cautioning them to start really, really conservative. Like I said, if you've never run before, then maybe the first time out the door, you're just doing 5 minutes, and you might do 1 minute at a slow jog and then 1 minute walking. And you repeat that until you get to 5 minutes. And that's what you do maybe for the first week. And then for the second week, you do it again. Maybe you do 7 minutes. And so you're just really, really gradual, because what you find in the development of new runners is that their cardiovascular system, their heart, their lungs, even their mental system with the feelings of fatigue, that adapts really, really fast to running. So it only takes a few runs, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, that run didn't feel terrible to me. I wasn't losing my breath and really feeling like I was going to die, And so that system adapts really fast. But what does not adapt very fast is the musculoskeletal system. So your muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones, and fascia, that all adapts much, much slower. And so we have to train at a level that the body, the musculoskeletal system, can adapt to. So with new runners, I focus on, let's find a routine that you can sustain for a month, right? So let's start with 3 days per week, because that's sustainable because you're busy. Secondly, we're going to take it very, very easily. We want to get through this first month with you feeling like you could do more, not feeling like running is a chore. And then the third thing is we want it to be progressive, but we want to progress at a level that your body can adapt to. So you don't do too much too soon. So my new runner programs are very conservative. They're very slow in the first 1, 2, and 3 months, because I know if we can just get you to 3 months of consistent training, then your musculoskeletal system will be strong enough to handle the running that you probably want to do, as opposed to what most runners do, and they start too fast, and by the time they really fall in love with the sport, they're injured. So if you're a new runner, it's all about find a consistent routine, be very, very gradual, never getting too out of breath, never feeling like running is a chore or a job. It should make you feel refreshed by the end, and you should always feel like you could have done a little bit more during that run. You could have gone a little bit farther, or you could have gone a little bit faster. That's when you know you're in the sweet spot of training.
Yeah, this is possibly the best time when you need to be conservative, if at all, if there is nothing else that you should consider. People should be looking at being conservative. This is, in my experience as well, Greg, I've seen when I chat with runners, they always say, hey, they can't do a run beyond a few minutes, or they can't run beyond half a kilometer. And when you start to understand this a bit more in detail, you figure out very soon that they are actually not running, they were sprinting.
Right.
And that's the reason they just can't go farther.
Yeah, and that's why the run walk program is such a great introduction to people, because it keeps them from fatiguing so quickly. And they're able to then give themselves an opportunity to learn, because a big part of training is learning yourself and learning those effort levels and learning your breathing levels and how fast can I go so that I can maintain my breath. That's why we talk a lot about the talk test being a good thing to use. And then the talk test, when you're training in the right zone for your just regular runs, you should be able to carry on a conversation. If you're not able to talk in complete sentences and kind of tell a story if you were running with somebody, then you need to slow down, or you need to take a walking break to recover your breath so you stay in the right zone. But you're right. Most people start and they run too fast. They're not ready for that. They get really out of breath. It's very painful. They have so many fatiguing messages coming into their mind that it's not a pleasant experience. And that's why I think if you are conservative, just give it time. We need to get 1, 2, 3 months down the road. Then you'll really be set up to go out and have a great running lifetime.
True. Thank you very much. Very, very helpful. You brought a very important point, and in fact, I'd almost forgotten it. The run walk program, which you talked about. What I've also experienced that the newbie runners specifically, if they're running and you ask them to walk, they think, hey, I'm a runner, why do I walk? Or they think that walking is ineffective. If they're running, they will get slower. I wanted your help to spend some time on the run walk program and how actually not an hindrance, but rather it helps you get better as you are and your body is figuring out the new adaptations and everything else as you start to train.
Yeah, you mentioned it a little bit before. If you're running continuously and you can only go half a kilometer, but if you use run walk and you can go 2 or 3 kilometers, that's more training. That's more opportunity for your fitness to build. So if you were to introduce the run walk program, you actually are getting more training
True.
than you were if you just ran. And that gives your body more exposure to running and run walking and just moving, and so it gives it more stimulus to adapt. So typically, what we see with the run walk program is it allows athletes to control their training better, as we discussed. They're able to get more training in within that training segment. So instead of fatiguing early, they wanted to do 10 minutes, but they got tired at 5 minutes. They're able to get that 10 minutes in. So they get significant more training. And then it allows their musculoskeletal system to gradually build stronger because running is more stressful on the musculoskeletal system than walking. So if you add in these walking breaks, it gives a little bit of reduced stress on the musculoskeletal system. And as I mentioned before, it's slow to adapt. So we've got to be really careful with it. So with the run walk, you get all of these added benefits that eventually will help you be fitter and faster than you would have if you just continue to try to just run until you were exhausted and fatigue yourself in that way. And that's why the run walk program has been so successful for newer runners, because it's more approachable, it's more delightful because it's tough if you're getting that fatigued. It doesn't motivate you to want to go out and do it. But if you do run walk, you finish feeling refreshed, and it allows that musculoskeletal system to adapt at a rate that it can. Then all of a sudden you get 3 or 4 months down the road, and then you're, well, I don't need to take a walk break every other minute. I can extend it and only take a walk break every 5 minutes. Or, well, maybe now I can run my 30 minutes continuously. My breath is under control. It's very pleasant for me. So that's why the run walk program can actually be better training in that case that we just described.
Makes absolute sense. Thank you so much for reiterating that. How about we move to the other end of the spectrum about Boston Marathon? You're possibly one coach who has helped maybe the maximum number of runners ever to qualify for Boston Marathon. I'm not sure how many. I last I knew it was more than 10,000 people who qualified for Boston. Is that right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's been really incredible.
Nice. So the question is, the Boston Marathon is not something that an average runner can get up and go and run. The process of qualifying in itself is it's a journey, and it requires a long-term sustainable effort in addition to many other variables being constant for you and working in your favor. In your opinion, what were some of the things that you found common among these runners when they came to you? And how did you work upon them with them that they went on to qualify for Boston Marathon?
Yeah, a lot of times that type of athlete that comes, they've hit a plateau. And the plateau, unfortunately, is slower than their Boston qualifying time. So we have to figure out how to get a boost in their fitness. And some of it is learning why they're failing in the marathon, why they're not achieving the Boston qualifying time. And based on that information, we can tweak their program going forward. So sometimes it's that their legs are just not strong enough to handle 26.2 miles or 42 kilometers of running. So we have to focus on training that builds stronger legs. Sometimes it's that their fueling is not correct, because if you're going to run the marathon, you have to have fueling. So we have to figure out a better system for fueling. Maybe the fast acting carbohydrates, like in gels and chews, are upsetting their stomach. And because their stomach gets upset during the run, they then stop fueling, but that's exactly when they need to fuel. So we have to figure out a fueling strategy that will work better. Or maybe marathon pace just feels a little bit too fast. They actually need to get faster first. So we need to improve their 10K or their half marathon time so that it makes their marathon pace feel easier. It makes the body not feel as stressed when they're running that pace. So, and then sometimes it is that they're doing training that doesn't fit their unique characteristics. So maybe you're more endurance focused, but you're doing a plan that has too much speed work, or maybe it's vice versa. You're more speed oriented, but you're trying to do a plan that's really for somebody who's more endurance oriented. So the training's not fitting you. If we take those components, those 3 or 4 components, that usually we can tease out what that athlete needs to get that boost in fitness that then they can go and hit their qualifying time. It's possible to do. A lot of times it's just, again, people get almost in a rut with their training. They do the same type of training and so they plateau really quickly, or they need just some sort of change that can give them that fitness boost so they can go and have that success.
Sure. This brings me to my second question about Boston Marathon. From India, not long ago, people in single digit, I repeat, people in single digit used to qualify for Boston Marathon. And recently it's been early two digits. That's been India's participation among recreational runners. And so what happens is it becomes this holy grail where people who qualify for it are really, really looked upon with great aspiration, etc. But at the same time, people also start to doubt whether normal runners who have picked up running few years ago, whether they will be able to at some point go and qualify for Boston Marathon. I'm sure from you having trained so many people and of course of different abilities who may not have been as fast in the start, do you think people here should think of that if they are dreaming of going to Boston, it's not a bad dream to have and they can really, really work towards it? Or do you think it actually requires for you to have very specific genes for you to be able to go and qualify for it?
No, I mean, if you go and look at Boston and go to the race, you see all shapes and sizes there. So it's not so much that you have the perfect genes to qualify. Most of the time it's about the training. It's about consistency over time. And sometimes it may take a few years to build to that point. Maybe you have to get faster at your 10K and your half marathon. You need to build up your training. You need to build up your body's ability to withstand running for so long. So it's not always automatic. And I think that's the challenge that some of us face, is that we see our training partner and they qualify for Boston the first time they go and try. And then for us, it may take 2 or 3 or 4 years in order to get to that level. But the one thing that's beautiful about Boston is that, as you say, it really is a badge of honor for runners to have achieved it. And secondly, it's a really great goal to have out there, even if it's a little unrealistic at the start. I think it's fun to have those kind of dreams out there. Sometimes that can help get you out the door when maybe you're feeling like you don't want to go for that run that you know you really need to go for. So I think it's a wonderful goal to have. And we see, having helped so many people qualify, it's not, you have to run a certain number of miles, or you have to be blessed with certain genetics, or you have to be, whatever. You just need to have that drive and commitment. And over time, it gives you a better and better shot at qualifying.
Sure. Still reaching your goal that's aspirational, it's generally going to be hard. It takes time. At times it gets boring. It's long term. It's lonely at times. How does one keep motivated and keep striving to go towards their goal? What could be some of your guidance around it?
Yeah, it's tough if the goal's really far off. That's always a challenge, I think, in any aspect of life where you have a goal that's really in the distance. And so most people, suggest that you break that into smaller and smaller goals, because the closer the goal is, the easier it is to get out the door. The easier it is to push yourself. The easier it is to do the right things that will help you toward that longer goal. So a lot of times I'm breaking it down to what's our goal for today, or what's our goal for this week, or what's our goal for this month, or for this training cycle. let's focus on this training cycle. We're going to improve your 10K. So we're really going to focus on that training. And we know that that's going to help you towards your ultimate goal. So I always just think that it's great to have the long-term goals, but it's really even more important to have a lot of really short goals, short-term goals, very close goals, very at present goals, and that will lead you toward that. That can help during those periods where if you look and it's so far away, you're not motivated to keep getting out the door. But if you have that shorter goal, I think it makes it easier.
I wanted to move from here towards the current situation in India as I speak with you. In the entire country, almost, we're going through lockdown because of COVID. And as a result, elites as well as recreational runners have been staying indoors. And and it's become harder and harder to keep fit, primarily because of one, we can't get outdoors, but also at the same times because of the situation outside, it's been stressful,
Yeah.
and not being active is not helping a lot as well. What in your opinion could be a few things that people can do, one, to manage their fitness, and second, to manage their stress, so that when the lockdown opens we can get back to our normal routines as soon as possible?
Yeah, I've spent the last year doing that. That's for sure. We've had athletes everywhere have faced the exact same situation, and it's been fluid, right? So it's been
Yeah.
lockdown and then it opens up and then lockdown again. So it's been extremely challenging outside of the challenge, as you mentioned, of just sort of living during this time. And so what we've done is we've tried to frame it in an opportunity. For some people, that gives them the opportunity to maybe work on their body in a way that they weren't doing before. So maybe they were neglecting their core or their mobility or some aspect of their strength that they weren't doing before because they were just going and enjoying their runs. Well, this is a perfect time to focus on that. That becomes your primary, is doing that sort of ancillary or non-running work inside because you have the opportunity to do it. That may build you into a more resilient runner when you start running again. That can make a big difference going forward. Some people, we're having them, they're doing sort of alternative fitness exercises. And obviously, there's a lot of online classes that people are doing, but even simple things like jumping rope or jumping jacks or mountain climbers or any of those more basic calisthenic type exercises can be done inside. They get your heart rate up, they let you kind of expend that energy, which helps lower that stress level, take your mind off of it. We always feel better at the end of a workout when we're pleasantly fatigued, our stress level is lower, cortisol levels go down, you sleep better, you take better care of your body. So I just had a guy, in fact, he moved to China, so he had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And he basically was trying to do a lot more of his core training. He was doing strength training. He was doing a lot of this sort of calisthenic type work. He was doing some jogging in place or around his apartment. Nothing extensive, but just light, just any movement is positive. And as a result, then when he did get off quarantine, he was able to transition back to running more easily. He wasn't starting from scratch. And of course, it was he was better able to tolerate kind of being locked in the hotel room in his case, um, by having this period of time where he was exercising. So I would say yes, it stinks for sure. It's not ideal, but what are the opportunities it presents that you could take advantage of? And those will have those additional benefits, as you say, of lowering your stress and taking your mind off of the current situation.
Sure. Do you have your team has put in, or have they created any resources online, etc., that I can direct our listeners to at all?
Yeah, so on the learn section of McMillanRunning.com, there is an article on adjustments for COVID. And so it goes through some of those adjustments that people are making in their training, which they may find beneficial. But again, as long as you're just doing something, if you're not just abandoning your routine, I think that you'll be fine once things settle down, hopefully sooner rather than later.
I'll direct it on the show notes for our listeners' easy benefit. I have another question around your interest and love for writing books. You have authored a number of books, and they've been fairly successful. How did that happen, and which is your latest book?
Yeah, I was really lucky that I always seemed to enjoy writing, and I was encouraged to do it in college by one of my English professors. And so he thought that I could do it. So I started doing it, and then I started writing articles for the local running club newsletter. And then I got hired to write for a publication. And I wrote, I had my own column in Running Times Magazine for 11 years. So I just enjoyed that process. And so it was natural to you kind of take more instead of an article, but make it into a book form. And so I've just kind of always done that. And You Only Faster was sort of the first kind of big book that I did that was successful, talking about how I manipulate training plans to make it fit better for the runner and have more success. And then the current book, which I just finished, is called Running Nirvana. And it's about the 50 lessons that I have found make the biggest impact to elevate people's running. And it's really what I'm teaching all the time to the athletes. And we cover run training, I cover strength training, I cover running form, brain training, nutrition. It's sort of a really larger collection of these lessons. So I'm excited for people to see it and be able to kind of learn those lessons that I teach the runners when I work with them. That was the idea of the latest book, because if you get it right, you have more fun running, you stay motivated, your fitness gets higher, your race performances are better, you feel better, you look better. It's all the things that we get involved with the sport for. They're just elevated. And so you do have more of those runs where you just feel like, man, this is so great. I feel so good. I feel fit. I'm really having a great time.
Yeah, I got hold of the Kindle edition. It's quite fantastic. I think the physical copy is not available in India, but got hold of the Kindle one.
Yep, it's we're working on international shipping, so we'll hopefully have that soon. But luckily with Kindle, it's super easy. You can, in fact, you got it before people get the physical book.
Sure. Okay, I have my last question to you, and I think you're most suitable to answer this also because you started the online training plan and programs when most people were only sticking on to the physical programs, etc. And so, my question is going to be around the tools and technology, like the power meter, the advanced GPS, the heart rate monitors, etc. What do you think, how do they help in general to people? Should people be overly obsessed about using them, looking at their strides, looking at the vertical oscillations and various other advanced level of matrices that it throws, or it's not something that people need to worry too much about?
Yeah, it's been really neat to see the evolution of technology and how it can provide useful information to the runner. And, it really is, all of training is for you to learn yourself. And in the past, it was the coach trying to help you have exposure to different types of training so you could kind of learn more about yourself. And now we have data that's even diving deeper in learning more about yourself. So, from that standpoint, it's wonderful that the person can have individualized information to help her understand what's better for her, what works for her, what are her experiences in training. The flip side, as you mentioned, is that we can become too externally focused and again, not see the tool as helping us, but we kind of become a slave to the tool and we're relying too much on it. That's a challenge for a lot of new runners, is that they feel like there's a right way to train every day, but every day you're a different person, you have a different set of circumstances, so you need to be a little bit more fluid. So what I teach is use the technology to help you better understand yourself, but remember, it can't know how you're feeling going into that run. It can't know if you're stressed out because of COVID or because of a life situation, or it can't know some of those components. So you need to run slower that day because that's the best run for you, even though the watch may say, oh, you're running too slow or this run is unproductive. That's not the
Yeah.
case. You have to kind of always understand that you're the one in control and the data is just there to kind of be to help you. But if there's ever a discrepancy, always defer to your own internal feelings. Your inner GPS is always more valuable than the external GPS.
Nice. This is going to be my quote of the week. Thank you for that. The inner GPS makes so much sense. Yeah, I agree. Use technology to make sense of the information that it gives and not overly be reliant on it, because like you said, the inner GPS is the best GPS. I completely agree with that.
Well, everything in technology is that we have a greater ability to collect data than we have the ability to understand how to use it or communicate how to use it and what's important, right? So,
True.
the watches can collect all of this information, but how are we supposed to know what's important or not? And that's where new runners really find it a challenge is, should I even care about this component? Me as a coach, I might say, we're not going to worry about that component right now. That's less important than this other component. This is what we're focused on. Maybe we'll address that later. So that's the thing, when you have all the data coming at you and every metric, it can be stressful. And that's where I just say, well, wait a minute. Let's just focus on the main things that are going to help us be consistent in our training and tell us a little bit more about you. But we won't worry about all of the data at this point in time.
True. Very true. Greg, any final thoughts from you before we close the session?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the explosion in running in India. I think it's like you said, it's been sort of bubbling up for a while now and maybe slightly slowed down by COVID. But if it's anything like here in the US, running actually took a big jump during COVID, because while we couldn't do races, there were a lot of people that they couldn't do anything else. They couldn't go to the gym, they couldn't go swim, they couldn't do these activities, but they could go out and go around their block a few times. So hopefully that'll be the case. And I'm very much looking forward to the opportunities, because I think, we'll agree that moving yourself across the earth under your own power on two legs is close of a panacea as we have in the world. So I think the more people that can get out there and start moving, they're really going to see their quality of life go up.
True. Running has actually, similar to in the US, it has picked up very well last year, in addition to cycling being very, very popular last year. All the cycle shops had the bikes sold out, the running shoes were sold out, and yeah, people were out more than ever before. Touch wood, it will keep growing for greater good of health and community's well-being for sure. Greg, thank you so much for being with us. It was fantastic to have a conversation with you, and I look forward to welcoming you again.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
This is all for today. If there is anything else that you would like for us to cover, please either give us a feedback via an email, or you can send a comment through any of our social media links, and we would be proactive to look at all of those comments right away. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you again in 1 week exactly.
Thank you for listening. We have a lot more to offer on nutrition, training, and fitness. Check the Fitpage app or visit our website, fitpage.in.